No. Okay.
She's on vacation.
I did not get any of the scouts to come to do. Yeah, we don't have any scouts here tonight for the Pledge of Allegiance. So who wants to volunteer? Okay. All right. Just hold on a second. We'll do it in just a minute. We'll get the thing going.
Stage one. Stage one for the
76.
Good answer.
Just don't question it.
Testing.
Test.
Technical difficulty.
90 something, easily. Who's the Townsend? Back inside aisle. It's a tall guy.
Can we use public access?
Okay, I think we have sound. Okay.
I think they're working.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right. It appears we do have a quorum, and we've appointed the counters. Guess we have got the quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. There being a quorum, this meeting, special town meeting on December 20th, 2018 is hereby called to order. All right, and so, Ms. Bazikas, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you. And I know, except for you die-hard town meeting people, most of us probably would rather not be here tonight, so we'll try to get through the town's business as quickly as we can with all due deliberate debate. But just to go over a few of our rules, we do go by town meeting time. And if there are any visitors here, I'd ask that they sit in the front row here, other than department heads, which I believe we have some, the fire chief and deputy chief of the police department on the other side. I am John Barrett, town moderator, and to my immediate right is the town clerk, Kathy Spofford, select woman Cindy King, select woman Sue Lizio, selectman Wayne Miller, our town administrator Jim Kreidler, and our new town council Adam Costas. So I'd like to welcome Adam to our proceedings. Sitting on the floor to my right, your left, is the Finance Committee, and again from my right to the left is Sam Grant. Okay. Jean, yeah, I couldn't see you. Jean Dilda, Geraldine Bazikas, and Lynn Pinkerton. I think that's everybody. And Again, just some preliminaries. Be sure you're recognized before you speak. I'll try to keep an eye out for everybody. Just raise your hand before you do. Direct all your comments and questions to me as the chair. All motions must be brought in writing up to the clerk. If the matter is finally voted, it may be reconsidered upon a majority vote if the motion is made tonight. If the meeting goes into a second night, God forbid, and the article voted on tonight would be only reconsidered with a 9/10 vote. A vote tally is questioned by any 7 voters. The counters will be called forward to take an actual count. If you are confused about anything on the floor, please raise your hand, and you can raise a point of order, or if you think that there's something going amiss, if you're having some problems hearing or anything, you can rise to a point of privilege, and you may interrupt the speaker to do so. I think everybody knows a motion to move the question cuts off debate. It requires a 2/3 vote, and you cannot interrupt the speaker. You must be recognized to make that motion. Just ask everybody to be courteous and keep applause to a minimum. Some towns ban it, quite frankly, but I think we are only human. And I guess that's the preliminaries, and now I just would like to hear the return of the warrant. Madam Clerk, if you have a return.
Hello? Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Pursuant to the within warrant, I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Townsend by posting up attested copies of the same at Memorial Hall, 272 Main Street at the center, West Townsend Fire Station, 460 Main Street in West Townsend, Police Communications Center, 70 Brookline Road, North Middlesex Regional High School, 19 Main Street, and Harbor Church, 80 Main Street, at least 14 days before the date of the meeting as within directed. Constable of Townsend, Michelle Dold.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. It appears we're ready to begin, although Mr. Cludier advises he would like some assistance running the microphone around. Do we have any able-bodied persons who could do that, assist? Don't jump up at once. All right. Mr. DeVoulas? All right, thank you. Okay, and Mr. Page, he will too. All right. Okay, we're ready to begin. Article 1, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum to be inserted for the purpose of paying prior fiscal year bills or taking any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Mr. Page. John, if you could hold for a minute, we do need the microphone for you. Yeah, I could hear you, but folks at home probably can't. I just would remind everyone that the meeting is being videotaped and being sent on to the folks at home, so to speak, and for future reference. So I just want to advise you of all that.
Mr. Moderator, I move that town meeting take Articles 29 and 30 out of order and advance them to be addressed first and second, respectively. The reason being that these articles are time-sensitive, and if they are not addressed tonight, it could leave the town in the position of having neither a moratorium nor a bylaw that would allow town control over issues surrounding recreational marijuana. This is not to diminish the other articles that also need the attention of town meeting.
Motion's made and seconded. John, that's not a main motion, but do you have it in writing? All right. Okay. This is a motion we don't often deal with, but I think it is something that the town could consider. And is there anything to be said on this motion? Ms. King.
There's so many buttons on this mic. I'm not in favor of moving those 2 articles. I think that they're very important articles, and I agree with John that they are very important and time sensitive, but so are the other 28 articles that have to do with important articles, financial nature that we need to address. I think that they're very important, and I think those are the kind of placeholders for all of us. I think many of you are here to discuss Articles 29 and 30, and I'd be happy if we keep them exactly where they are so that we have you for the entire evening to talk about the very important articles that might seem to be more minor for everyone. So I'd like to ask the quorum to not move these two and keep them exactly where they are so that we can quickly address the other important 28 articles. Thank you.
Okay, comments come on the motion. Anything else to be said? Okay, and there doesn't appear to be any, so I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion to take the articles out of order, beginning with Articles 29 and 30, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. I'm going to defer to my predecessor, because I am at loss, or to Town Council. I believe that just requires a majority vote. Okay. All right, just to be sure. All right, so we have before us Article 29. Unless anyone objects, I am not going to read the article. It is in the printed warrant. And so, is there any objection to my not reading it? Okay, no objection. So, is there a motion? Yep.
Good evening. Thank you, sir. Chad Sexton Duranian, Planning Board for the Town of Townsend. In November 2016, the majority of Townsend voters supported the legislation of recreational marijuana in Massachusetts. The Town of Townsend has the option to permit or restrict, ban recreational marijuana establishments. The Planning Board believes that the decision to allow recreational marijuana establishments in the Town of Townsend is a very important decision and should be left to the residents to decide. Since the majority of the Townsend voters supported legislation of recreational marijuana, any restriction/ban on recreational marijuana establishments must be passed by a ballot election and at town meeting. In support of letting the town residents determine the fate of recreational marijuana establishments in Townsend, the Planning Board is submitting Article 29 to extend the temporary moratorium of recreational marijuana establishments until June 28, 2019. The Planning Board has voted in favor to petition the Board of Selectmen to put a general bylaw on the ballot, currently scheduled for April 22, 2019. Assuming that ballot question passes, the ballot question will go to the town meeting, currently scheduled for May 7, 2019. Upon passing at the town meeting, recreational marijuana establishments will be restricted/banned in the Town of Townsend. The Planning Board is also submitting Article 30 to put zoning restrictions in place for permitting recreational marijuana establishments. The rationale for the Planning Board to submit Article 30 is to ensure zoning regulations are put in place for recreational marijuana establishments in the event the moratorium extension fails to pass or is rejected by the Attorney General. Assuming the temporary moratorium extension is approved at town meeting and by the Attorney General, Article 30 permitting recreational marijuana will only go into effect if the residents fail to pass a restriction/ban at the ballot and town meeting. Article 29, I move that the town vote to amend the town's zoning bylaw to be added Section 145-89 to extend the temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments.
Okay, I believe you, was that the Planning Board report that you gave first? Okay. Yes, what's your point of order, Mr. Rala? Right, right. Normally, the motion would be read by the proponents and then seconded, and then you'd give that report. So I didn't want to stop you because you're on a roll there. But do you have the motion on Article 29? Okay, now would be the time to read that.
I move that the town vote to amend the Townsend zoning bylaw by adding section 145-89 to extend the temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments.
Yeah, you really have to read the whole thing unless there's a motion. Typically, we do read, this one we could read, so you should read it all, the whole bylaw. On the moratorium, yeah.
Temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments that would provide as follows, and further to amend the table of contents and add section 145-89, temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments. 145-89, temporary moratorium of recreational marijuana. On November 8, 2016, the voters of the Commonwealth approved a law regulating the cultivation, processing, distribution, possession, and use of marijuana for recreational purposes. New General Law 94G, regulation to the use and distribution of marijuana not medically prescribed. The law, which allows certain personal use and possession of marijuana, took effect on December 15, 2016, and as amended December 30th, 2016 by Chapter 351 of the Acts of 2016 and thereafter on July 28th. This is what you wanted me to read, correct?
Yep.
Okay. By Chapter 55 of the Acts of 2017, requires a Cannabis Control Commission to issue regulations regarding the licensing of commercial activities by March 15, 2018, and to begin accepting applications for licenses no later than April 1, 2018. Currently, under the zoning bylaw, a non-medical marijuana establishment, herein a recreational marijuana establishment, as defined in General Law 94G, subsection 1, is not specifically addressed in the Townsend zoning bylaw. The regulation of recreational marijuana raises novel legal, planning, and public safety issues, and the town needs time to study and consider the regulation of recreational marijuana establishments and address such issues, as well as to address the potential impact of the state regulations on local zoning and to undertake a planning process to consider amending the Townsend zoning bylaw regarding regulation of recreational marijuana establishments. This temporary moratorium on the use of land and structures in the town for recreational marijuana establishments will allow sufficient time to address the effects of such structures and uses in the town and to enact bylaws in a consistent manner. A definition: recreational marijuana establishment shall mean a marijuana cultivator, independent testing laboratory, marijuana product manufacturer, marijuana retailer, or any other type of licensed marijuana-related business. Temporary moratorium: for the reasons set forth above, and notwithstanding any other provision of the zoning bylaw to the contrary, the town hereby adopts a temporary moratorium on the use of land or structures for a recreational marijuana establishment and other uses related to recreational marijuana. The moratorium shall be in effect through June 28, 2019, or until a bylaw is earlier approved. During the moratorium period, the Planning Board, on behalf of the Town of Townsend, shall undertake a planning process to address the potential impacts of recreational marijuana in the town and to consider the Cannabis Control Commission regulations regarding recreational marijuana establishments, and shall consider adopting new zoning bylaws in response to these new issues.
It's the motion on Article 29. Is there a second? Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Yeah, Mr. Kreidler.
Thank you. Just on the substance of the motion as read, I believe that the proponent was reading from an earlier version. Very specifically, there's a line that says, shall be in effect through June 28, 2019. There should be a period full stop at that point. An earlier version had the continuing phrase, or until a bylaw is passed. That should not be included in this motion because the very next article could pass a bylaw, which would then mean that you have no chance of a moratorium. So perhaps an amendment to the motion as made to delete that last phrase, a copy of which I don't have this evening, but I know Chaz just read it. Do you follow what I'm saying, Chaz?
I follow you. I realize that, and it does beg the question, if the moratorium does extend through June 28th, what's the effect of adopting Article 30 if we do?
May I ask Town Council?
Yeah, Mr. Costas?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the next article, the full bylaw relative to recreational marijuana, would be in effect immediately, except that it would be superseded by the temporary moratorium if that temporary moratorium passes per the article that's presently before you. Again, to sort of reiterate, in an earlier version of the warrant, there was the language that that Mr. Kreidler just read. The intent of that language at the time was to provide for a circumstance where the moratorium would be null and void in the event that the bylaw were adopted. I think the intent of these two articles as they're printed in the current version of the warrant is not to do that, but rather to have the moratorium take effect regardless, assuming that it achieves the appropriate vote tonight, but then also to potentially adopt a bylaw that would be in effect in the event, for example, that the moratorium does not pass muster with the Attorney General's office.
Okay. Comments come on the motion. Is there any other questions? Comments? Mrs. King?
I don't think there's any reason for us to have a moratorium. I think we have a bylaw in the next article where the planning board has had more than 2 years to come up with a bylaw, and there is a bylaw on the table. 2,900 voters voted in November of 2016 in this town. A record number of voters voted in that election. And our residents voted to approve recreational marijuana. And we've had 2 years to come up with a bylaw. And there is one here. I think it needs some work. But I have faith in those that are present here that we can move forward with Article 30 by not taking any action on Article 29 and discussing Article 30, tearing it apart, and making some adjustments that I think, but it's up to all of us, to discuss some of the issues that are relative in Article 30. And let's just get this done. The towns around us, including Ashby, I went to a meeting last night in Ashby, from the cultivators that are opening, that are in the permitting process. They had their community outreach meeting last night in Ashby, and they're moving forward with multiple facilities in Ashby. Our residents are going to take our tax money and go down the street to Ashby and spend their money and buy their pot at the end of this year, and we're going to be sitting here talking about a moratorium that the Attorney General might not pass. So I'm going to hold my comments right now for Article 30, but I'd like to ask that those of us, let's not do a moratorium, and let's just take Article 30, tear it down, and spit it out, and come up with an article that we want, that our voters said we want to have recreational marijuana and get up to $1 million in tax revenue coming into this town effective next year. We need it, and we don't want to give it to the towns around us. Thank you.
Ms. Lizio?
Mr. Moderator, I'm curious to know whether or not Ms. King speaks as a select person or as a resident.
Mostly as a resident, but as a selectman, it's my obligation to make sure that you understand what's going on. And I think this is an important, I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, for jumping in, but both. But as a resident, this is how I feel about it, and as a selectman, I think it is my responsibility to report my observations, and I've done quite a bit of homework on this.
All right. Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Moderator, I come to these meetings and I like to go with the people that have been appointed to make these decisions. The planning board has made a decision that they would like to have a little extra time to determine what the bylaw should be. I don't mind waiting. If somebody feels that in need of recreational marijuana, it's only 20 minutes to Ashby, you know what I'm saying? So I think we should honor the people that have been appointed to the planning board and take their suggestions. Thank you.
All right, comments come on the motion, and I'm sorry, I didn't get your name before.
Chaz Sexton Duranian.
Okay.
Chaz, C-H-A-Z.
Okay.
I want to be clear that the planning board is looking to have a vote. That's what our main goal is for it to extend the moratorium. To have a vote on whether or not the residents of Townsend really want recreational marijuana facility in their town. That is the primary purpose. The town itself, yes, has voted statewide in regards to the marijuana issue. But what we're looking for specifically is, does the town itself want to have a recreational marijuana facility in the town? That's why we're asking to extend the moratorium, so that we are able to make the proper plans, have the townspeople have a voice. That is our primary goal, is to allow each and every one of you to have a voice in this, on whether or not you want recreational marijuana in the town.
Okay. Mr. Stonefield. Mr. Stonefield?
Right, not Article 30.
Right now, we're on Article 29. There has been a suggestion that there be an amendment, but there hasn't been an amendment on that language that Mr. Kreidler mentioned. All right, Steve, there's a hand up there.
Hey, I'm Pat Gemolo. Like Cindy said, we've already been over all this. We don't want to drag our feet. And yes, the other towns are going way ahead of us. We need this money in the town. If you look at all the articles and how everybody wants this and wants that, and unless you want these taxes to go up even more, which I'm having a hard time paying now, then I suggest we just do what Cindy says. Let's get on with this. We voted for this. You know, I mean, like she said, we can, put things in there the way we want it to be worded. So let's do it.
All right, Ms. Lizio.
I don't know if this will help or not. My understanding is there are 4 different types of marijuana facilities. One is medical, one is growing, one is R&D, and one is recreational. People call them pot shops. Okay? It doesn't mean voting on the moratorium and voting on the bylaw doesn't mean that we're saying eventually no to everything. If we say no on the moratorium, it's going to mean that bylaw takes place. That's going to mean any one of those 4 could go into those zoning areas. The moratorium question is to allow us time, as Chaz said, to come back, put a ballot question on our town ballot, so that we can say specifically which one do we want, or is there one that we don't want. You don't have to have them all. You don't have to have every single one of those. You have a choice, but it has to go to ballot in April. The moratorium allows us the time to figure that out, figure out what the bylaws are going to look like, and then bring it to a vote. Because saying yes to marijuana, to legalize marijuana in the state, is a lot different than saying, I want pot shops on the corner in my town. And you have a right to do that. You have a right to make it specific to you. And that's what the moratorium would allow you to do.
All right. Comments come on the motion, and is it Ms. Kelly? Yeah.
I wanted to make a motion to
Kelly, if you could identify yourself.
Kelly, Taurus Lane. I just wanted to make a motion to adjust the current motion to reflect the language that Mr. Kreidler was suggested be deleted, and as suggested by town council. I want to make sure that gets done.
Okay.
So I make a motion to amend the current motion to delete or until a bylaw is earlier approved. from the current motion.
There's a motion to amend. Is there a second? Okay. All right, so this is the motion. I move to amend the motion by deleting the words "or until a bylaw is earlier approved." And I don't know if you're going to sign that, Kelly, but, or Chad, if you want to sign it. Okay, so that the first business now is going to be whether or not to vote this amendment as has been suggested. Is there any discussion about the amendment? Doesn't appear to be any. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. All right, so the amended motion is before you on Article 29, which would adopt a moratorium on recreational marijuana facilities. Is there anything else to be said? I don't see anyone. So, all right, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the amended motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Okay. This requires a two-thirds vote to adopt a zoning ordinance, a bylaw. So my sense is that we had two-thirds there. I'll ask to try that one more time on orally. Say again? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. I think we're going to have to count it. Otherwise, there could be questions. Could I ask the counters come forward? Okay. Now we have two people counting up in the balcony, Mrs. Brown and Mr. Rahala. Okay. All those in favor of the article, please stand. No, we already passed the amendment by a voice vote. This is the article to approve a moratorium on Article 29. So all those in favor, please stand. I don't vote unless there's a tie. Well, that's what I've been told. Tell them which ones to count on this. Okay.
Mr. Moderator?
Okay. 13? Okay, all you folks can sit down. All those opposed to the motion on Article 29, please stand.
Moderator, 2.
2. Thank you. Okay. The vote is 76 in favor, 27 opposed. By my math, is a two-thirds approval. I'm not a math whiz. Anybody doubt that? Yeah, okay. I think it's roughly, yeah. Okay, the article passes. On to 76 to 27. The 100, let's see, that 76 and 27 would be, I think that's, well, two-thirds for 103 total votes would be roughly about, 68, 69 maybe, so I think it's two-thirds. You got the computer there? Okay, Kelly, what did you got? 0.7? Okay, so we're good. All right, on to the next article. Article 30 is now before us, and unless anyone objects, I am not going to read the article. Does anybody object? Okay. Is there a motion on Article 30? Mr. Sexton.
So I don't have to read the... Do I read the motion?
If
I have the motion, but do I need to read the...
we need a motion, but we also need the report, and I feel that we have to determine whether or not the whole article needs to be read by a vote of the town. I think the town can exercise its authority not to have the whole article read if there is a printed article. Is there a printed article that...
Yes, we've supplied a printed article. We've also have an amendment that we put in there as well.
Okay. I'd just like to make a technical observation that handout that has the article printed that Mr. Sexton is going to move has a typographical error on the top that it says I believe it refers to itself as being Article 18 or Article 16.
Thank you.
In the handout? Or is that for the section of the bylaw? In the handout, at the top of the page, it says proposed amendments are underlined in bold print. Did everyone get the handout, the separate handout? Okay. No, there's a separate, I say 3-page handout printed on both sides that was up front. I'd like to take the time out to make sure that everybody's got that. Was within the bylaw. Okay. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
That's the
okay.
same thing.
Thank you.
On the bottom.
We'll get some copies of that handout so everybody can see what is going to be proposed. Okay. Maybe we're not doing that. Yeah. Can folks raise their hand if they don't have a copy of the handout? Okay. Well, that's just the motion without the content of the article. Okay? I'd like to see that everybody gets a copy of this handout which shows the actual article. I mean, the bylaw that's going to be adopted.
Did you guys supply the handout?
Yeah, we're getting that.
No,
So Beth made copies for it, let's do it, put it in the package. So the planning board made copies and Mark made it. Yeah.
So we don't have any more?
I can make some.
Oh, I have.
Okay. Unfortunately, we apparently don't have any other copies, and I don't know if... he's going to put it on the screen? Okay. Carolyn, could you make some? I think there's only maybe about a dozen people that don't have it. Sorry, Chad, this is your baptism under fire. And
Right?
we have had a practice in the past that if we have a lengthy zoning bylaw, that if we have a printed copy so that people can see what it is, we'll waive the reading of the whole article if the town meeting approves that. And we'll waive the reading of the whole article in the motion and just take the motion to adopt the article as in the printed handout. But I think it's important for everybody to see what we have and have that opportunity. So
I also agree with you, Mr. Moderator. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The amendments that we are proposing is actually to add a title to it, and there's some formatting amendments. It's not a lengthy amendment to the document itself.
okay, so besides the printed article, you're going to have some amendments of this.
Correct.
Okay. Let's see if we can get copies of this for everybody, and then we'll take up the motion and then the amendments.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Jackson. We don't have anything before us, but I'll take your question as a point of order or a point of privilege.
It's a point of information, basically. We have Article 30 here, and we have a special. There's just a little bit of difference in the writing of the handout that you're going to get everybody than we are looking at for Article 30. Is the amendment for Article 30 that we're going to be talking about and voting on that amendment, and then voting on Article 30? Or how's that going to work?
Okay. What? All right. Mr. Costas, do you have a comment then?
Mr. Moderator, so I'm going to try to explain this as simply as I can because I know there's some confusion and it's a relatively detailed and somewhat lengthy article. So Article 30 is an article that proposes the creation of a new section of the zoning bylaw entitled Recreational Marijuana Establishment. The version that you've got printed in your warrant is a complete version of what is proposed. I believe the movant was just suggesting that momentarily when he makes his motion, he will be making a motion to adopt what you have printed in your warrant. However, it will include a series of very few changes which are shown on the handout that was provided tonight. These changes resulted from the fact that, as is the case with any zoning bylaw, the planning board is required in advance of town meeting to hold a public hearing. And as a consequence of that public hearing, very often there are some minor modifications beyond what has already gone to press and already been printed on the warrant at that time. And so I believe that the article, the motion on the article will incorporate the changes that are shown on the handout. To the extent that not everybody that is present tonight has a copy of the handout, I see that there's also a copy of the handout on the overhead. I think that whether the movement would like to do it, I can do it. We could certainly walk through what's on the overhead very simply and very quickly to identify the series of, I think it's 4 total changes that will be incorporated into the motion. They are very, very simple, very brief changes to what is already printed on the warrant.
Okay, we're still waiting. Everybody got a copy of the handout now? So, one more out here. I guess what I would like to suggest, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Costas, but if the handout is exactly what is being proposed for the bylaw, rather than making the motion to adopt as printed in the original warrant, I would suggest that the motion be to amend the zoning bylaw by adopting the bylaw as printed in the handout. That would incorporate all the changes rather than us having to go from a motion to adopt this bylaw to a series of amendments for the other handout. Do folks follow me on that? I think we've done that in the past, at least when there's some changes, but Mr. Moderator, Deputy Moderator. Gene, could you use the mic? He's got one upstairs.
My question would be this to the planning board and to town council. When I read in any of these formats, it appears you're implementing a special permit provision. So you're asking by one vote, and this is possible, to amend separate sections of the bylaw in adopting Article 30. I agree with Mr. Moderator. If Article 30 in this handout is exactly the details, I'm asking whether or not it should be split into separate questions, because you're going to conform your bylaw provisions about special permit granting authorities, which one it is, and all of those details. Has that gone to the planning board? Are they going to report separately on each of those? Are we in the four squares of the motion? If it's going to be one motion, it's going to be a heck of a motion, and I think it should be read. I don't think we can rely on this until somebody says that when you go to send it to the AG, we voted exactly what's on this handout.
Thank you, Mr. Rahala. Mr. Costas?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So I want to be clear again, because maybe I wasn't the first time. So the handout that you have before you, entitled Article 18, which is an article within the bylaw, a new proposed article, entitled Recreational Marijuana Establishment Zoning Proposal. And you'll see below that it's identified as Section 145-89, which would be a new self-contained section of zoning, is everything that follows over the course of 5 pages. So although there are subsections, as there are with any zoning bylaw, Section A is definitions, or purpose rather, Section B is location, Section C is applicability, D is special permit approval criteria. This is not a series of independent modifications to different sections of the bylaw, which can become confusing, and certainly my recommendation typically to municipalities is that they take those up as separate warrant articles. That's not what's being proposed here. What's being proposed is an entirely new self-contained section of the zoning bylaw that would address and would regulate recreational marijuana establishments. Yes, it would create a special permit process in certain districts where these certain types of facilities are allowed, and it would establish certain special permit criteria. It would apply to certain types of facilities but not to others. There would be provisions concerning conditions, concerning abandonment, concerning discontinuance. All of that is within the self-contained document. So my issue is not so much with moving this as a single article. I think that is relatively simple to do. I just want to be sure that what ultimately gets moved, Mr. Moderator, is related in some way back to what was printed in the warrant. So if your preference, Mr. Moderator, is to simply move the handout because the handout now incorporates the changes, certainly I have no objection to that, so long as it's understood, and maybe even referenced in the motion, that that is the fact, that the handout is really one and the same with what was printed in the warrant, with the exception of a few minor changes. Because I don't want this to fail upon Attorney General review on the basis that what was moved was some handout provided to residents as they walked in the door, as opposed to something that was printed a minimum of 14 days in advance in the special town meeting warrant.
Okay. Well, I think what I will defer to is to hear the motion, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to amend the town's zoning bylaw by adding a new Article 18, Section 145-90, entitled Recreational Marijuana Establishment Zoning, as printed in the warrant, but with the underlined amendments shown in the handout provided tonight, which include clarification on the definition of Cannabis Control Commission, a definition for host community agreement, and certain modifications to the special permit approval criteria, and further, to add the new section 145-90 to the zoning bylaws table of contents.
Okay. So the motion's been made to adopt a new zoning bylaw, which the town was given notice of in the warrant. There are some, the motion includes the fact that there are some minor changes which are shown on the printed handout, and those are incorporated in the motion. So, if the meeting is comfortable with proceeding with the, having had the warrant article posted and the new printed amendments before you, if there's no objection, we can proceed without, I think, reading the whole article. Is there any objection to doing that? Mr. Shaka? Well, are you rising to object? Because all right, I want to get that clear. Okay.
The handout reads subsection 145-89. Didn't we just vote on 145-89?
I believe, was that the article? I believe it was. Right. Okay, Mr. Costas, you're going to get a workout tonight.
I am, Mr. Moderator. It's a typo in the handout. It was printed correctly in the warrant, in fact. Because of the fact that there was a temporary moratorium that was just adopted, that needs to utilize the number 89, and so it's number 90. The motion did reference section 90, so the
Section
motion
90.
is proper.
Okay, so if everyone will make note of the fact that there is a typographical error, it should say section 145, section 90 in the handout. 145-90. The motion was correct. The motion did reference it as 145-90. All right, I believe the motion's before you. Is there anything to be said? Okay, Mr. Cloutier.
I have a question on the motion. Did the planning board or the people proposing this determine that it is possible to locate a facility within town within this criteria? I ask that question because if it is in fact impossible to do, then the law will be considered, I've seen these laws nullified if it is not possible to actually build a facility. So I was reading some of the criteria in section 3, and I don't know that it's actually possible to put one anyplace in town due to the measurement calculation. So I asked that question so that we don't get ourselves hosed in the event we can't do it.
All right, question comes on the motion, and Ms. King, do you want to reply? I mean, I'll leave it up to the planning board, but...
Yeah, I have the same concerns, and I I'm going to at some point, which you all can let me make the amendment, but I'll wait until we have some discussion. But in paragraph D3, we have 1, 2, and 3. Number 3 gives all kinds of places where we can't, 3C in particular gives a number of places where we can't put a marijuana facility. And after conversation, both at the public hearing the other day and in conversations that the planning board has had with all of us, they said it's not invalid because there's one location in Townsend in which a marijuana facility can be located, and that's at the old town dump. That's what was spoken by Mr. McNally on multiple occasions, that it's okay because we can have pot at the dump. I will be making a motion, I'll make it now, I'm making a motion to amend. I'm going to make an amendment to change section D3 to delete 3C, D, E, F, and G.
Point of order.
Mr. Rahala, your point of order?
We haven't gone to a planning board report yet.
Quite right.
And we're now taking substantive discussion. We got past the problem of adding 90 because that got cured. But still, I think we got to hear a planning board report. What are they recommending? And have we passed a moratorium just for this reason to discuss this at future meetings until the 20 whatever of June?
Your point's well taken, Mr. Rahala. I've neglected to ask we got questions right away, and normally the planning board will, I would recognize the planning board for report, so I'm sorry, Mr. Sexton, if you have a report on this article, if Ms. King, you'll defer your motion for the time being.
I do, sir. So this would be the report for Article 30?
Right.
In November 2016, the majority of Townsend voters supported the legalization of recreational marijuana in Massachusetts. The town of Townsend has the option to permit or restrict/ban recreational marijuana establishments. The planning board believes that this decision to allow recreational marijuana establishments in the town of Townsend is a very important decision and should be left to the residents to decide. Since the majority of the Townsend voters supported legalization of recreational marijuana, any restriction/ban on recreational marijuana establishments must be passed by a ballot election and at town meeting. In support of letting the town residents determine the fate of recreational marijuana establishments in Townsend, the Planning Board is submitting Article 29 to extend the temporary moratorium.
Mr. Sexton, I think, is this concerning Article 29?
The Planning Board is also submitting Article 30 to put zoning restrictions in place for permitting recreational marijuana establishments. The rationale for the Planning Board to submit Article 30 is to ensure zoning regulations are put in place for recreational marijuana establishments in the event the moratorium extension fails to pass or is rejected by the Attorney General. Assuming the temporary moratorium extension is approved at town meeting and by the Attorney General, Article 30 permitting recreational marijuana will only go into effect if the residents fail to pass the restriction/ban at the ballot and town meeting.
Okay, I'd have to say, normally the report will have something about the planning board held a hearing, that there was a vote, and the planning board approves this bylaw or doesn't approve the bylaw. So I feel that there's some issues with that report, quite frankly. Mr. Rahala.
I would move we take no action on Article 30.
Okay. All right. Motion's been made to take no action on Article 30.
The reason being, I believe we should have those planning board hearings to go into the issues of what the floor would be discussing here, would be amending the bylaw without apparently any opinion from the planning board as to are they in favor of these changes? Yeah, this report is wholly inadequate.
If I might, Mr. Raha, I do know the planning board did hold a hearing on these articles. It's just that the report doesn't seem to reflect that, which normally it would do. So I'm at a bit of a loss as to how to proceed, because we can't enact a zoning bylaw change without a report of the planning board. And I understand, I think maybe that with a few modifications, Mr. Sexton, that report could fulfill the requirements, but if you could flush that out a little bit, I think as far as when this hearing was held, and did the planning board vote as a result of the hearing on these bylaws, on these bylaw changes?
If I can have a moment, can I get a document that I think I'm missing? This is a trial by fire. In case the attorney closes it down. The attorney general holds it down, then we're open. Mr. Moderator, thank you very much for your patience. If I may add to my motion.
Okay, hold on, folks. All right, Mr. Sexton.
The Planning Board had a public hearing on Wednesday, December 12th, 2018, which was posted both in the newspaper and on the website. We also met again on December 17th, 2018, and we incorporated the information gained at the public hearing to fulfill what we had for, what we presented today for our article.
Okay, and so what was the planning board's recommendation on this?
To go forward with Article 30.
Okay. So in favor?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's the planning board's report. So is there anything else to be said? Mr. Cloutier. Oh, I'm sorry. I had recognized Mr. Grant. He raised his hand. Mr. Grant.
Sam Grant here. We have voted to hold this, whatever we do tonight, off until the 28th of June, correct? The moratorium lasts until then, regardless of whether we have an bylaw or not, correct? And there are a whole lot of questions about the bylaw, and I've just learned that the several meetings with the public invited to have been held in the last several weeks before this. So even if you were in attendance there, you might not have had time to digest the fact that, as Cindy's brought up, if you take it out to the dump, then we can set one up there. I'd like to personally suggest that we go with the fine gentleman on the balcony and put on hold, because we'll be meeting back here again the first, whatever, of May, and we have a chance to hopefully see that the planning commissions has more than just 2, and more than 2 before April.
All right, all right. Comments come on the motion. And I know Mr. Cloutier, I had recognized him, and now we got a whole bunch, but Mr. Cloutier, I'd seen you.
Sure. Okay. I want to be quick. I don't want to belabor this too long, but I think the article has a bug, and that bug is in section, everybody can read it, section D3A, which says a medical marijuana establishments cannot be located within 500 feet radius of any residential district. Okay, that all sounds fine. Turn over to D. On the other side, it says distances are calculated property line to property line for A. I do not believe there are any commercial pieces of property or industrial pieces of property that do not abut within 500 feet a residential property, which means you couldn't build one in town. I mean, and if this is the truth, this law will be thrown out. It's like some town passed, you couldn't put an adult entertainment district. They only said they could put it in the swamp. Well, guess what? That was thrown out, and it's on Main Street now. So we don't want this as written. So that's all I have to say. Hopefully somebody else will pick up the gauntlet.
Okay, Mr. Page.
Mr. Moderator, a question through you to Town Council. What would be the effect of either taking no action or defeating this, given our approval of the moratorium extension and what the AG's office has been doing with moratorium extensions?
Question comes on the motion for Town Council. Mr. Costas?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, thank you. So in a usual sense, if you've adopted a moratorium that prohibits a certain type of use, then you might say there's no need to also adopt a bylaw that regulates that type of use because it's prohibited for the term of the moratorium. That would generally be correct. The problem is under Massachusetts zoning law, municipalities can't simply adopt moratoria whenever they so choose. The Attorney General's office, who reviews and approves every bylaw, every zoning bylaw, and other bylaw that is adopted by a municipality, will only approve moratoria if there is a valid planning purpose to support the moratorium, and will only approve them for a limited period of time to allow the municipality to utilize the period of the moratorium to implement that valid planning purpose, to partake in a planning process, to investigate the particular use in question, to determine how best to address it, how to zone it in, zone it out, do whatever you might choose to do. And so I think, and I don't want to speak for anybody on stage or for the planning board, but I think what prompted the regulation, in addition to the moratorium that you've just passed, is a concern that you didn't just pass a moratorium, you just passed an extension of a moratorium that has already been in effect for a year. And so the concern is, will the Attorney General's office approve an extension of a moratorium that has already been in effect? And you're not the only municipality that has that question. Many municipalities across the state, all of which are grappling with this idea of marijuana having been legalized as an adult use and how best to zone for it. The concern is that so far, just since special town meeting time, September, October, November, December, there have been 4 communities that have received letters in the past month and a half that adopted extensions of their temporary moratoria, and those extensions were rejected by the Attorney General's office on the basis that when the AG delved into what they've been doing for the past 6 or 12 or in some cases 18 months, the Attorney General's office determined that those municipalities hadn't shown that they were making enough of an effort to implement a valid planning process. Essentially what the AG's office said is they sat on their hands, they waited until the absolute last minute, and then they said, well, we'll just extend the moratorium. So although that's not how I would characterize what Townsend has done, I think that there's evidence that more has been done. It wasn't a situation where the town simply sat on its hands until last week or the week before. There is some evidence in the record to suggest that. I'm still questioning whether or not the Attorney General will approve the moratorium that you just passed. There is no guarantee. Again, within the past several weeks, there have been 5 extensions in total. 4 have been stricken down, 1 has been approved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Costas. Mr. Shank.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Aston Town Council, I guess the question, if the Attorney General turns this extension down, do we virtually open ourselves up January 1st to have anybody come in and open up a marijuana facility and we have no protection whatsoever? So that's my understanding, going to the public hearings that I've attended. I think we need to at least pass the law to protect us. If it needs to get tweaked, I think we should. But come January 1st, if we don't have something on the books, I think we opened ourselves up for a real bad deal here.
Okay, I don't know if that sort of came as a question. Mr. Shank, Mr. Costas, if you could field that.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And again, through you. So the answer to that question is yes and no. And I say that because in many respects, yes, you open yourselves up. If the moratorium does not pass muster with the Attorney General, and you have not adopted the article that is presently before you to establish a self-contained bylaw that regulates recreational marijuana establishments, then a proponent of such an establishment can come into Townsend, look at your existing zoning, and try and liken their establishment to some other type of use that's allowed in your community. So if they want to open a retail establishment, they could look in your bylaw and say, well, there's obviously no category for marijuana retail establishments because you haven't adopted zoning, but maybe you've got a category for other retail uses or retail uses over 5,000 square feet. And they would try and sneak into that category because you haven't prohibited them and you haven't regulated them. Same thing with cultivation. They could find those locations where cultivation would be permitted, and they could seek to cultivate marijuana the same way that you would cultivate any other type of crop, for example. So that is the risk. Now, there is one level of protection, and it's not the same as having a bylaw in effect, or a prohibition in effect, or a moratorium in effect, and that is that under Massachusetts law, as rewritten by the legislature after the initial referendum passed about a year and a half, 2 years ago, any community requires, or any applicant requires a host community agreement be signed with the community itself, with the municipality. And so no marijuana establishment can simply step into town and say, we're going to essentially shove this down your throat whether you like it or not. They can't say that. They can come in, they've got to go to your selectmen first. They have to negotiate a host community agreement with your selectmen, which the selectmen have to vote to approve, and then they can proceed. So that's a bit of a fail-safe there. It gives you some protection, but the protection it gives you is up to your selectmen, essentially, as to whether or not they believe that the proponent's facility is an appropriate one or not. From a zoning perspective, there would be no protection because you would not have a bylaw.
Okay, Mr. Clark.
Ward Clark, School Street. After the planning board report was read, there was some question about whether a vote was taken by the planning board to approve or not approve or whatever, and that seemed to be fuzzed over. So in the interest of making sure that all of the legalities are done, you said we needed a planning board report and we needed a vote from the planning board. Did that happen?
All right, question comes on the motion. Mr. Sexton, can you respond to that?
The planning board did vote on that. That was on December 17th, 2018. That was on Monday.
And what was the vote?
The vote was we are going forward with Article 30. We agree with it.
Unanimously?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Ms. Lizio.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm standing down here because I'm Sue Licio. I live at 28 Ash Street, Townsend. I'm not speaking as a selectman. I'm speaking as a voter. I can't pretend that I don't know some of the background, so I'm going to just speak the way that I want to speak. The way that I look at it is good. We passed the moratorium. We don't know if that'll pass snuff at the Attorney General's office or not. We'll have to wait and see, but I think passing a zoning law, having a zoning law on the books, even if it's not perfect today, is better than not having anything to go along with that moratorium, because I believe it shows good faith on the part of the community, on the part of the planning board, on the wonderful help that we've gotten from town council. And I really believe that they're going to say, look, Townsend's really trying to figure this thing out, and they're being very careful and very slow and really taking their time to make it be what it should be. And I think they're going to say okay to the moratorium. I think that come April, you're going to have a choice at the ballot for what to do here in town, where you live, where your children live, and we'll go from there. But let's not throw the baby away with the bathwater. You know, slow and steady wins the race, and sometimes we have to be patient and we have to take steps that aren't perfect. It happens to all of us. The other reason that I'm standing down here is because the Board of Selectmen did not take a vote on where we stood in terms of marijuana, because I think it's a personal decision. It has not come up. We have not voted on it. And I don't think it's fair for me to sit up there as a select person and say that. So I'm just speaking the way that I think. And I think we need to vote on it in April. So please pass this bylaw.
Mr. Chanel?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Chanel, Burgess Road. I just want to lend my support to what Sue was saying. The danger of not passing a bylaw today is if the moratorium question is rejected by the AG's office, we are left vulnerable. And I understand what town council's position is, but it also is anybody could come in on an application with a town agreement and file an application on the state's minimum. It basically opens up all of 119 and some other towns as well. To not pass the bylaw as it's proposed, I understand, Stephen, that there's some issues with it. I have some issues as well. Cindy has some issues. But to have something in place would limit the ability of other people to come in and just willy-nilly file an application with the selectmen and put an establishment in. If we don't have something in place, I think we are vulnerable. So I would support what Sue said and ask everybody to pass this bylaw. Even if it's not perfect, at least we have something on the books.
Okay. I just want to make, I'll recognize you next. I just wanted to make one comment here, just for a procedural reason. I know that Mr. Sexton said, but I don't think it was part of the motion, that if this bylaw passed, it would only become effective if the moratorium didn't pass. And because, as I see it, if we pass the moratorium, if it's approved by the Attorney General, and then we pass this bylaw, I think we have a moratorium and we have a new marijuana facility bylaw, if both of them are approved by the Attorney General. I just want to clarify that, and maybe that's okay, but the moratorium would take precedence.
Through you, Mr. Moderator?
Yeah.
So I think certainly that's the intent, and that would be my opinion. If there's a concern on the part of the moderator or the movement that may be unclear, for example, if this were to arise in a review by the Attorney General, I suspect the Attorney General would contact the town and would review the minutes of town meeting. But if there's a concern that it would be unclear, certainly the movement could modify the motion to simply specify that the article before you, Article 30, would only take effect if the moratorium does not survive review by the Attorney General.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Costas. All right. Let that idea germinate. Ma'am?
Valerie Goodrich, 128 Haynes Road. My question is regarding this article. Is there anything that requires us to reevaluate this or vote on it in April? If this article passes, I mean, it's then on town, the moratorium expires if we don't take a vote as a town. Do we have to readdress it at annual town meeting next year, or is it just now our zoning bylaw? I just want to make sure that we have a process by which this will be reviewed next at our annual town meeting and not at just the special town meeting.
I don't mean to speak for the planning board, but I believe that it's an ongoing work, and as I think someone mentioned, that if it needs to be tweaked, they'll continue to tweak it so that we might have some tweaking done at the annual town meeting. if that's... No, there's no requirement to vote again, no. No, not with what's before us tonight. Okay, back, I'm sorry, yep, right there. Linda.
I just had a quick question. If the bylaw passes, will there be any type of variance or exceptions? Can an interested party then apply for a variance?
I don't know if someone wants to field that, but I think typically it would be a use variance, I believe, and I don't believe that would be allowed under our zoning.
Okay, and one other quick question. Can you explain the schedule of use regulations, what the acronyms mean?
Well, if you want, you mean the RA and RB? And I think, well, that's Residence A, Residence B. If you look at the zoning map, it defines certain areas. RA, I think, requires 3 acres to build on. RB requires 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Mr. Stonefield.
We're not discussing what's in the article itself. Therefore, we should clear up what's before on no action.
All right. That's a good point. Sort of got back into the motion. So there was a motion to take no action, which I believe had some discussion because we're trying to figure out what the effect of that could be. Normally, you would not have a discussion on a motion to take no action. It does require a 2/3 vote. So if we were to vote to take no action, we would be basically skipping over this article and leaving it unenacted. So it is a motion that requires a 2/3 vote, and it is generally undebatable. So I will poll the meeting. All those in favor of taking no action?
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Shepard.
If I may, there seems to be a great deal of confusion around this, so I had some questions to just simplify it. And could you simplify what a yes vote means on the take no action and what a no vote means on a take no action?
I take that as a point of order. Basically, if we take a positive vote on taking no action, we would be skipping over Article 30 and leaving us without any zoning enactment other than the moratorium. And as Attorney Costas explained, if the Attorney General does not approve that moratorium article, we would have no bylaw concerning recreational marijuana. So there is arguably the potential that an applicant could position a facility anywhere in the town because there's no restriction. So that's the concern I think that people have expressed. I'm just articulating that.
So, John, a yes vote means we take no action on question 30. A no vote on the question on the floor means that we move to question 30 and begin that conversation.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So, all those in favor of Mr. Ahala?
Could you repeat the quantum of vote that you're going to require?
2/3.
I think that's on the zoning bylaw, but not on a motion to take no action. I think it's a majority vote.
Well, I think... How's that different than a lay on the table? We have a little bit of... our practice is to take no action. There's a motion to take no action, but that isn't really found in town meeting time. There's a motion to lay on the table, or there's a motion to postpone indefinitely. And if we were going to postpone indefinitely, that requires a majority vote and may be debated and reconsidered. So... This could, I think it could be viewed as either, unless someone wants to refine the motion. I'll go with it requiring a majority vote. is to postpone indefinitely, taking no action. So, all those in favor of taking no action, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. Okay, the noes have it. Back to the main motion on Article 30. And I'm sorry, I thought there was someone that I was going to recognize. Right, over there. Yep.
My question, Emily Austin Bruns, 30 Beach Street. My question is, if the AG approves our previous motion, is this vote for Article 30 then null and void, and we go back to the drawing board and come back with a new bylaw for the town to approve? Or, regardless, this is the bylaw that we passed tonight, and then moving forward, if there are amendments, then we would see those, and that would be something we would vote on.
Okay. Question comes on the motion. And Mr. Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, through you. This particular article is going, this bylaw is going to protect us in the event that the Attorney General rejects our proposed moratorium until June. If they accept that, that will allow the town to vote on whether or not we want establishments or not, which will also give the planning board a better direction on what we need to set up for a bylaw if it's a positive vote. Does that make sense?
Okay. I'll allow a quick follow-up, and then Mr. Clark.
So is your end game for us to vote eventually whether we want establishments at all, and then therefore a bylaw wouldn't be needed?
And Mr. Sexton?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, we are allowing the town to vote to tell us what you want as far as, do you want recreational marijuana facilities in town or not? And then we'll be able to set up those bylaws accordingly.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator.
Well,
in further
Mr. Clark, I did see Mr. Clark's hand up first.
Just to her question.
Okay.
Okay. As I understand it, if we pass Article 30 tonight, we have a bylaw. Okay? And it will last forever until it gets changed. Now, you're saying you want to give people the opportunity to have a vote or something like that. So, but we're voting tonight if we pass Article 30. What's the plan for the springtime? You've alluded to the town having a vote, or maybe it goes on the town election thing, but we don't know what mechanism you're proposing. So you ought to be a little bit more clear about that, it seems.
Mr. Kreidler?
Thank you. First, through you, Mr. Moderator, to the woman's previous question. The second part of your question is what's going to happen. If this bylaw passes this evening, irrespective of what happens with the moratorium, this bylaw is on the books. So if the moratorium passes, it's still on the books and it's real, but it has no effect because the moratorium takes precedence. If it doesn't pass, the moratorium doesn't pass, the bylaw then is in effect and will be, as Mr. Clark said, forever unless it's changed. Does that answer that part of your question?
Could you wait for the mic?
So if the, okay, right. So if the moratorium is accepted, right? This bylaw is still in place come June 2019, so that doesn't change anything.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Clark. To Mr. Clark's question.
All right, if you would, Mr. Kreidler.
Thank you. I think your point is well taken that there's some confusion about what this spring vote to give the people the chance to be heard means. Just to kind of go to the 10,000-foot view, the town in the statewide election voted to support recreational or adult use marijuana. So because this is a yes community, you cannot prohibit it in the town of Townsend without going to a town meeting seeking a prohibition, and then a companion vote at the ballot, where you go and close the booth and you have your privacy and you say yes or no. So what Mr. Duranian is talking about is we would propose a moratorium extension. As the suspenders with that belt, we would have the bylaw, and then that buys us time in both cases to get to the spring ballot election and town meeting to seek to actually rule it out completely. Mr. Duranian, is that? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kreidler. I think that clears up a lot in my mind. Any other questions of Mr. Grant?
Without being able to sit down with a map to figure out exactly what the zoning bylaw means about where you can put the particular facility, whether it's to grow, sell, retail. My understanding, by the little reading I have and others giving their opinion here, there's very little place. And my understanding is if you're not allowing by your zoning the ability for an establishment to come in here and reasonably set up a business, either as an ag or a retail or anything in between, then you're opening yourself right back up to Main Street, right next to the drugstore, because the courts are going to open it up, and we already have an issue in here to be voted on later about pretty expensive legal bills. Are we looking forward to getting more legal bills? Is that what we like to pay? We like our lawyers that much?
I'll take that as a rhetorical question, Mr. Grant, because I'm not going to answer it. Mr. Shepherd?
Thank you, John. It's always good to be part of the democratic process, even though it's frustrating as all get out when we're 4 days away from a great holiday. This reminds me of the past 30 years when I've come to these meetings and don't really enjoy them, but I feel it's kind of my patriotic chore, that we went through this debate when we discussed having a strip joint in the town of Townsend. I don't know who remembers that. There's one location that you can open one up, best of my recollection, and this is similar. So I like to subscribe to the KISS mentality or dumb it down or whatever somebody wants to think of it so that they're not offended. It appears to me, with all the confusion and the multi-layers of this bylaw, that failure to have something in place in the moratorium to fail, we are effectively putting ourselves at risk of someone stepping in, just a yes or no answer, someone from outside stepping in, challenging that and getting a permit because we do not have a bylaw. Is that true, yes or no?
I would defer that question to counsel.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. So the answer to the question is actually no, but sort of on a technicality. They wouldn't need to challenge anything. They could simply come in and make application in a zoning district that allowed, or as closely as possible, allowed the type of use that they were proposing. I go back to my example before of the allowance of retail uses in one of your commercial districts.
Is it easier then to do it without a zoning bylaw than it is with a zoning bylaw?
Based upon the zoning bylaw that is now before you, that zoning bylaw restricts these facilities in the substantial majority of zoning districts in your community. So it is far more restrictive than what an applicant would be subject to if they came in the absence of any bylaw and simply attempted to use your existing zoning bylaw allowances to their benefit.
So herein lies the problem, Mr. Moderator, is a simple yes or no question for those of us that do not participate in the weekly, monthly meetings that the planning board does and holds the hearings. We ask for a simple yes or no answer and we get more confusion. So unfortunately, my question really wasn't answered for my brain, and maybe it doesn't matter if we pass this or not, but leading up to this, I was beginning to believe that failure to have a zoning bylaw relative to this issue would make it a whole lot easier for someone to come in, propose any type of marijuana facility of the four, and place it anywhere they want. But town council has told me that's not the case, but this, but that. So Mr. Kreidler is shaking his head, and I would direct this to you. Failure to have a zoning bylaw relative to marijuana, does it become much easier for a proponent to bring it to Townsend and place it in any location without a zoning bylaw, good or bad, in place?
Mr. Moderator.
Yeah, I think suffice to say it's complicated, and Mr. Kreidler give you a little opportunity to try to clarify.
Yes or no,
that.
Jim?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Lizio.
Yes, they could come in and they could say, gee, you don't have a zoning bylaw that covers marijuana, so I'm going to say I'm going to go in under this zoning law. So let's go to the Board of Selectmen and let's see what they have to say, because they're the ones that I can make an agreement with. And I, for one, don't want the Board of Selectmen speaking for everybody in the town. I think we should pass the bylaw.
All right. Mr. Stonefield.
Second.
Okay. Question has been moved and seconded. This would cut off debate on the article. All those in favor of moving the question, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it by more than two-thirds. So we will now vote on this amendment. This is a zoning bylaw amendment, so it does require a two-thirds vote. So all those in favor of the motion on Article 30, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. I'm going to declare that more than two-thirds and give anybody opportunity to challenge that if they want. Okay. All right. That brings us back to Article 1, I believe. Okay, we'll start all over. All right, folks, I know it's a bit of a relief to get those past us, but let's moving on. Article 1, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum to be inserted for the purpose of paying prior fiscal year bills or take any other action in relation thereto. All you folks, we sort of had a contract there that you're not going to leave the building until we get them. Well, do what you will. I will have it. Okay. Is there a motion on Article 1? Ms. Lizio.
Hello, yes. I'm not sure this is worded correctly. May I say what I have, and you can
Sure.
tell me how I might rephrase it? I move that the town vote to take no action on this article. How, is that okay?
Well, that's the one we've always used, and
Okay.
it's never really been as hotly debated, but I'll defer to my senior that it requires a majority vote, and I don't think it's debatable, is it? It is debatable, okay. So it's motion made and seconded to take no action on Article 1. Is there any debate? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 2, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $7,500 for the purpose of funding the costs associated with placing the American flags along Main Street during the holiday celebrations, or to take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that
Okay.
the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury this sum of $7,500 for the purpose of funding the cost associated with placing the American flags along Main Street during holiday celebrations.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there anything to be said? I don't see any hands. Okay. All right. Seems we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. I think the ayes have it. A majority vote. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $35,000 to supplement the legal expense account or take any other action in relation thereto.
Mr. Moderator.
Motion. Mr. Miller.
I move that the town vote to transfer free cash in the treasury the sum of $35,000 to supplement the legal expense account.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there anything to be said? Not seeing any. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 3, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Oh. Well, either the ayes have to get a little more forceful or the noes have to get a little less. I'm going to try that one more time. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it by majority. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $50,000 to pay one-time retroactive wage settlements for police, fire, and non-public safety unionized town employees, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $50,000 to pay one-time retroactive wage settlements for police, fire, and non-public safety unionized town employees.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Gordon Clark, Libra Lane, Townsend. For point of information, during these collective bargaining agreements, by unanimous vote, I was the liaison conducting all negotiations under the direction of Town Council, Union Council, and Mr. Kryler. So I have a basis of knowledge here. I look in the back here, and some of the departments who are requesting money from the townspeople have put documents. I do not see the document by unanimous vote of the Board of Selectmen going back some time for an audit due to concerns and some physical missed payments or lack of payments through some of the collective bargainings. I do not see this audit, and how can we pay bills that we do not know the correct amounts of the salaries? This was also endorsed at the meeting by Chief Bailey, as he had concerns about the accuracy of the books. Could someone from the Board of Selectmen please tell us where that, by unanimous vote, audit is?
Question comes on the motion. Is there any response? Mr. Miller? Mr. Kreidler.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mr. Clark. The article before you seeking to fund the collective bargaining agreements is a separate issue from, and there was no consideration given to, a prior discussion with the previous board about an audit of salaries in one of the departments.
Again, I don't see how you can make a determination what you owe people. I have several questions, but this is the first. Until you know that there's an accurate accounting of pay. There was concerns, there was unanimous vote. Why was that audit not done? When there was taxpayers' money put out, some of it in 5 figures because of inaccuracies, and there was a unanimous vote to go back 3 years to do an audit. One only has to look at the news lately to see when audits are done, what problems could be in payrolls. So again, where is the audit, please?
Okay, question comes on the motion. I don't know if we have anyone that can answer that question. Question as to whether an audit was prepared, as I understand your question, Mr. Clark, to be able to determine the number for this article?
Yes, so that it's accurate. But I would like to know where the audit is so we know that the numbers that we're going to pay retroactive. First of all, I have a couple other questions, that they're accurate. There was definite articulable concerns that the amounts may not be correct. That is factual.
All right.
And it's factual that there was a unanimous vote taken by the board to do an audit. And it's also factual that at the time the chief of police endorsed that.
All right, thank you. Any further response on that point? And Mr. Shank.
First, this money, the way I understand it, and I'm going to disagree with Mr. Clark, but that's okay. This money is owed, I believe, to all the firefighters, police officers, and EMTs in this community, highway, and the rest of them, that have not been treated and got the money they rightfully deserved because Mr. Clark did that. Move the question.
All right, our practice...
Mr. Bartlett, I'd like a chance to respond to
No,
a personal
our
attack on my
practice is
character.
We don't allow folks to present a opinion or question and then move the question. It has to be a separate motion.
Mr. Bartlett?
Mr. Clark?
First of all, this isn't personal. This is law, which usually you like to follow law. And as a fact is about treating employees correctly, I personally want to apologize to the unions that signed and were told that we had money to be physically responsible, set aside for raises, and there would be no additional money, that there was no additional money. We also were in state mediation, and every single day that we were in mediation, over a couple hundred hours, every day in writing, and it's a public record Mr. Crowley has in his office, and I don't believe those records have been destroyed, unlike other records.
Well,
It will show,
Clark, if you
the state
kindly-
mediator will show that there was no request made by some of these unions for retroactive pay. So the point is here is that if you give your word to good employees, which they are, that there is no additional money, and they sign, and they've been paying a higher insurance rate for 2 years, that the people, has that been calculated into this retroactive? So I just want transparency and truth. Where is the audit, second of all? Two, and another thing was misrepresented, that to tell the townspeople that if you don't approve this, that there'll have to be cuts. Under Mass General Law, which I believe in law, Mr. Schenk, Mass General Law, Section 150E, Section 7, states under collective bargaining that we are not obligated if the town meeting does not approve this, that they're to go back to the bargaining table, and also to treat everyone fairly.
You have to be recognized to move the question.
And I still haven't got an answer where the audit is, Mr. Bartlett.
There may not be an answer, unfortunately, Mr. Clark, because I don't have that
It's
answer.
either yes or no from the Board of Selectmen. They can say that. They did not do a vote, or they did.
All right,
on audit.
Ms. Jackson.
Jane Jackson, Blood Road, move the question.
All right. Motion's been made to move the question. As everyone knows, this will cut off debate. All those in favor of moving the question, please say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it by two-thirds vote. So we are now voting on Article 4. All those in favor of the motion on Article 4, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. Article 5. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $5,500 to supplement the audit services expense account, or take any other action in relation thereto. Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $5,500 to supplement the audit services expense account.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any hands. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 5, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 6. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $3,900 to supplement the facilities expense account for the purpose of repairing or replacing a relay/electronic start to the elevator for the town hall, or take any other action in relation thereto.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Miller.
I move the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $3,900 to supplement the facilities expense account for the purpose of repairing or replacing a relay electronic start to the elevator for town hall.
Motion's made and seconded. Any debate? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 7. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $5,000 to supplement the facilities expense account for the purpose of replacing a water pump related to the heating system for town hall, or take any other action in relation thereto.
Mr. Moderator?
Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $5,000 to supplement the facilities expense account for the purpose of replacing a water pump related to the heating system for town hall.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $7,500 for the purpose of funding an update to the roadway pavement management plan or take any other action in relation thereto.
Mr. Moderator?
Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $7,500 for the purpose of funding an update to the roadway pavement management plan.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Article 9, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $1,500 for the town's share of the regional animal control shelter or take any other action in relation thereto.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $1,500 for the town's share of the regional animal control shelter.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor on Article 9, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Article 10, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $2,100 for the purpose of replacing, repairing the rifle strap on the John Burney Blood Monument, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Okay. Mr. Miller? Oh. Ms. Heyman?
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $2,100 for the purpose of replacing, repairing the rifle strap on the John Burney Blood Monument.
All right, thank you. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to amend the fiscal year 18 capital plan by authorizing the highway superintendent to use $46,000 approved for truck-mounted ground speed spreader controls toward the purchase of a roadside mower as approved by the capital planning committee or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator?
Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to amend the FY18 capital plan by authorizing the highway superintendent to use the $46,000 approved for truck-mounted ground speed spreader controls toward the purchase of a roadside mower as approved by the capital planning committee.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any. Appears we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Article 12, to see if the town will vote to amend the fiscal year 19 capital plan and raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $66,360 for the purpose of replacing Medic 1 for the Townsend Fire EMS Department as approved by the Capital Planning Committee or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to amend the fiscal year 19 capital plan and transfer $66,360 from ambulance receipts in the Treasury for the purpose of replacing Medic 1 for the Townsend Fire EMS Department as approved by the Capital Planning Committee.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Unanimous. Article 13, to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $5,000 for the purpose of repairing or replacing a portion of the roof at 274 Main Street, also known as the Rec Center, or take any other action in relation thereto.
Mr. Moderator?
Mr. Miller.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the treasury the sum of $5,000 for the purpose of repairing or replacing a portion of the roof at 274 Main Street, also known as the Rec Center.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? It appears we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate borrow transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $5,000 for the purpose of administrative, professional, and/or technical costs associated with the periodic review of and amendments to the Charter, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the treasury the sum of $5,000 for the purpose of administrative, professional, and/or technical costs associated with the periodic review of and amendments to the Charter.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right, up. There's a hand in the back. I guess, all right, Steve.
Kim Greeno, Wallace Hill Road. This sounds really vague. Can somebody please explain these sort of rambling needs on this item?
Okay, question comes on the motion. Someone venture a response? Ms. Lizio?
Do we have that presentation thing? John? She's not here. Okay, well, basically, we formed a charter review committee. There have been 2 previous charter review committees, and unfortunately, neither one of the results of those ever got to town meeting. We're committed to this one coming to town meeting, so incorporating some of the changes that were primarily wordsmithing at the beginning, a little bit more substantial at the second one, and I'm finding, and I think we're finding that this one is pretty much a review of those 2 with maybe some changes to clarify some stuff. I don't think there's any significant changes, but we've been supposed to do this for the last 5 or 6 years, according to the charter. And finally, I think we're on track to be able to give you a report in April. This money is going to be used if we have an opportunity to do some hearings and, presentations in advance so that you folks will all get a chance to see what the changes are ahead of town meeting and distribute some materials to you.
Comments come on the motion. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. Appears we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 14, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 15, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $10,000 for the purpose of supplementing the reserve fund or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Lynn Pinkerton, 351 Main Street. I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the treasury the sum of $9,954.77 for the purpose of restoring the reserve fund.
Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second? I just want to clarify that this does require a majority vote to add to the reserve fund? Okay, it's a majority vote only. So Anything to be said? All right, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor of Article 15, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate borrow transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $15,000 for the purpose of supplementing the fiscal year 19 Police Department operating budget, appropriation for the lease of 4 police cruisers, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $15,000 for the purpose of supplementing the fiscal year 19 Police Department operating budget, appropriation for the lease of 4 police cruisers, and to authorize the town to enter into a 3-year lease agreements for that purpose.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Appears to be none. All those in favor of the motion on Article 16, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 17, to see if the town will vote to transfer within the Water Enterprise Fund the sum of $30,000 from free cash to the professional services expense account, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Mr. Rayfuse.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to transfer within the Water Enterprise Fund the sum of $30,000 from free cash to the professional services expense account.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Appears to be none. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed say no. That's rather weak ayes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Okay. The ayes have it. Article 18, to see if the town will vote to transfer within the Water Enterprise Fund the sum of $115,000 from free cash to the Meadow Road Main Replacement Capital Improvement Plan project, or take any other action in relation thereto. Mr. Rayfuse.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to transfer within the Water Enterprise Fund the sum of $115,000 from free cash to the Meadow Road Main Replacement Capital Improvement Plan project.
Motion. Is there a second? Okay. All right.
Mr. Moderator.
Made and seconded.
That is not supposed to come from free cash. It's water retained earnings, is it not? We just don't want it to come out of the general fund free cash.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Rayfuse.
It is stipulated from the Enterprise Fund, Water Enterprise Fund, free cash. Unretained earnings. If you want me to change that, I will.
Will the town meeting accept a friendly amendment? Okay. All right. So this, if you could clarify that it's money is coming from where, Mr. Rayfuse?
Free cash from the Water Enterprise Fund, which is otherwise known as unretained earnings.
Okay. All right. That satisfies you, Ms. Lizzie? Okay. Any questions? Yep.
Good evening, Richard Shuford, Maplewood Drive. Since it's over $100,000 here, could we perhaps have a brief description of the nature of the project to be funded?
Question comes on the motion. Mr. Rayfuse?
Sure. This is to replace about 1,000 feet of 12-inch water main on Meadow Road that goes through like a wetland swamp section there. We've had problems with that section for the last 4 or 5 years in a row. The reason there's such a increase in the amount needed was it got submitted as a capital plan project the previous year. Problem being, we have to have those amounts in by December 1st. There was $100,000 in there. When we went out to bid, Probably, I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago, bids came in significantly higher than what was budgeted, and also including engineering fees. So we need this extra amount to supplement that so we can go back out to bid, get the job done. This would also complete a loop previously serviced, so it would maintain improved water quality as well.
Comments come on the question on the motion. Anything else to be said? I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 18, please say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Seems unanimous. Article 19, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $10,000 for the purpose of supplementing the professional services line item in the fiscal year 19 Treasurer Collector budget to cover the cost of the required professional services of a municipal finance consultant during the absence of the Treasurer Collector, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a
Mr.
motion?
Moderator?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I move the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $10,000 for the purpose of supplementing the professional services line item in the fiscal year 19 Treasurer Collector budget to cover the cost of required professional services of a municipal finance consultant during the absence of the Treasurer Collector.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any questions or comments on Article 19? Not seeing any. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 20, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $100,000 for the purpose of funding information technology and telephone system upgrades for the Town Hall, the Library, the Council on Aging, the Highway Department, the Water Department, and the Cemetery and Parks Department, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator,
Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $100,000 for the purpose of funding information technology and telephone system upgrades for the Town Hall, the Library, the Council on Aging, the Highway Department, the Water Department, and the Cemetery and Parks Department.
Motion's been made and seconded. There appears to be some discussion. Gentlemen, right there in the third.
Wayne Freitag, Joyce Street. I was just wondering how that's going to get split up.
Question comes on the motion. Mr. Kreidler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to the gentleman's question. The town applied for and received a grant to have a system assessment done by a company called Acuity. They're on the state vendor list, so they're approved for us to use as a consultant. Subsequent to that, we also received a grant to have a system analysis costed out, so our entire infrastructure costed out. We did receive the cost of roughly $150,000 to do the work. We received, subsequent to that, a $50,000 grant to do part of the work. This extra 100 would do the total project. What we'd be doing is, and again, I'm not a tech guy, but we'd be replacing all of the hardware that we have in this building and for the connections that we have to all of the outlying buildings. The two departments that are missing here are police and fire because they recently had their own upgrades when the regional communication was done with over at Neshoba at Devon's. Everything that is, whatever needs to happen there in order to be able to talk to the things here, they'll get.
Comments come on the motion. Sorry, forgot your name.
That's all right. Emily Austin, Bruns, 30 Beach Street. It would seem to appear that the rec center is missing from this equation.
Comments come on the motion about the rec center. Mr. Kreidler?
If I could defer to our IT director, Osama Wad.
Sure, any objection to that? No? Okay, go ahead.
I'll give you a mic.
No, you can't have a mic.
Just about the rec center.
The rack?
The rec center, yeah.
Okay, so part of this upgrade that we're going to have to replace the servers that is at the rack server. We have to replace the firewalls as well and improve the wireless connection between the rack and actually the library as well. So that's answering your question.
Mr. Moderator, through you to the woman's question or point.
Yep.
You're correct, it doesn't say that. In my mind, at least, when I look at the assessment done by Acuity, it's considered part of the town hall just because we're the same campus.
So they are in the same building. They have the same. They share the same data information at the between the library and the rec center.
So the expenditures will include the rec center. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, gentlemen?
Hi, Colby Streeter, 230 Wallace Hill Road. What's the deficiency in the system right now?
Question comes on the motion.
I can actually answer that if you want.
Oh, Mr. Cloutier.
So I used to do this job, but I have moved on to Bose doing Alexa skills, and I'm going to retire shortly. I built the infrastructure that's in place now approximately 20 years ago. So while it works, it's based on Unix. It requires an extensive knowledge base to deal with Unix systems. I mean, that is a very unusual skill for a town to have. The other thing is, frankly, a lot of the servers are pretty old, and while Boston has been doing a great job, nursing them along, we would be better served having new modern equipment that would use less power. There are many good reasons to do this. And believe me, and I know a lot about this, if I thought there was something wrong, I would be speaking in objection.
Comments come on the motion. Hopefully that satisfied your question. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 20, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum to be inserted for the purpose of funding HVAC and lighting repairs and/or upgrades in the library, the meeting hall, and/or the Council on Aging buildings, or take any other action in relation thereto. The motion, Ms. King.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $10,000 for the purpose of funding HVAC and lighting repairs and/or upgrades in the library, meeting hall, and/or the Council on Aging buildings.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any hands. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 21, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 22. This is a real property article. Requires a 2/3 vote. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise, on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen shall determine, permanent and/or temporary easements on the parcels of land shown on the plans entitled Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division Plan and Profile of description to be inserted, revised through a certain date in 2018, prepared by someone. As said plans may be amended, said plans on file with the town clerk for passage thereupon, both pedestrian and vehicular, also including but not limited to the construction, alteration, maintenance, improvement, repair, and/or replacement of the West Meadow Road Bridge, drainage, grading, clearing, and slope work, erosion control, relocation of utility poles and guy wires, loaming and seeding and landscaping, and further to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for these purposes, and for any expenses related thereto, and still further to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into all agreements and take all related actions necessary or appropriate to carry out said acquisitions and other acts authorized herein, as upon such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen may deem appropriate, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator.
Probably should have omitted my reading of that.
That would have been much Unfortunately, I have all the blanks filled, so.
You have to fill in some blanks, Mr. Miller.
Okay. I move the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen, I'll just read it. I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire the by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen shall determine permanent and/or temporary easements on the parcels of land shown on plans entitled Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division, and profile West Meadow Road Bridge number T07-013 revised through November 8th, 2018, prepared by DTC. As said plans may be amended, said plans on file with the town clerk for passage thereupon, both pedestrian and vehicular, also including but not limited to the construction, alteration, maintenance, improvement, repair, and/or replacement of the West Meadow Road Bridge, drainage, grading, clearing, and slope work, erosion control, relocation of utility poles and guy wires, loaming and seeding and landscaping, and further, I move the town vote to transfer from free cash a sum of $5,000 for the purposes of and any expenses related thereto, and still further to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into all agreements and take all related actions necessary or appropriate to carry out said acquisitions and other acts authorized herein as upon such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen may deem appropriate.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Greeno. Steve in the back.
Kim Greeno, Wallace Hill Road. I'm reading the FinCom addition to our packet, and it says it's unconscientious of us to recommend a project of this magnitude without an approximation of the cost. So are we getting that?
Mr. Moderator.
Kreidler.
Through you to the questioner, the FinCom did not have the cost filled in when they voted on it, so their vote is very appropriate because they can't be asked to vote on expenditure without knowing the number. Subsequent to their vote, that number has been determined and filled in. What you see on the screen in front of you is a depiction of the areas we're talking about. You'll see a little bit in pink, some in yellow, and then some in blue. What you're looking at is, as a result of some of the good work that your public safety folks did in town, the bridge was going to be replaced and the road was going to be closed for the entirety of the project, which could be up to 2 years. That would require anybody on the other side of that bridge to have to access their homes through Ashby. If there's a public safety issue, similarly up through Ashby. So folks on your behalf advocated that the plan be changed. They redesigned it and put a temporary bridge in. What this shows is in the dark blue area is the area where there'll be a temporary bridge installed. So that's a temporary easement that would be sought. What you see in pink is roughly, oh goodness, less than 75 square feet of area that would be a permanent easement ultimately sought. And in yellow, you'll see the entirety of the left side of the bridge. The majority of that is temporary easement with the exception of the little boxes, and those are roughly 50 square feet each, and those would be permanent easements. So at the end of the day, we have the cooperation of all the landowners. It likely will be accomplished without any compensation, but the law requires that we appropriate an amount of money as we go forward, so when we pass in the paperwork to the Department of Transportation, we can show that we've done what they ask us to do.
Comments come on the motion. Ms. Craven.
Kim Craven, Lunenburg Road. I just want the town meeting members to know what Mr. Kreidler said is, in fact, 100% true that the landowners on either side met. I happen to be a trust member of one of the lands. My father's the trustee. He's granted this permission, and Mr. McGovern, who owns the old Roberts property, went out as well and have agreed to this. So I really hope that it can go forward so that we don't have to inconvenience our fellow neighbors up on West Meadow Road.
Okay, comments come on the motion. Anything further to be said? Not seeing any. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 22, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. I would rule that that was more than two-thirds necessary vote. I only heard one no. So it passes by a two-thirds vote. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to convey, sell, or otherwise dispose of that certain parcel of town-owned land known as Atwood Acres, Parcel 2B, situated off Dudley Road, consisting of 11 acres of land, more or less, and more fully described in a deed recorded with the Middlesex South District Registry of Deeds at Book 593 and page 2646, on such terms and conditions subject to such restrictions and limitations, and for such consideration as the selectmen may deem necessary or appropriate, said property to be used for the development of low to moderate income housing for veterans, and transfer to be in accordance with all local, state, federal laws as may be applicable. And 2, further authorize the Board of Selectmen to undertake all such action as may be required to effect the foregoing conveyance, including but not limited to the filing and prosecution of a petition for declaratory judgment in the court of competent jurisdiction relative to the future uses of the property, and or the petitioning of the general court of the Commonwealth under applicable law for special legislations accomplishing the same, or taking any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Oh, okay. Mr. Sexton.
Chad Sexton Duranian. I move that the town vote to see the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to convey, sell, or otherwise dispose of that certain parcel of town-owned land known as Atwood Acres, Parcel 2B, situated off Dudley Road, consisting of 11 acres of land, more or less, and more fully described in a deed recorded with the Middlesex South District Registry of Deeds at Book 593, page 2646, on such terms and conditions subject to such restrictions and limitations, and for such consideration as the selectmen may deem necessary or appropriate, said property to be used for the development of low to moderate income housing for veterans, and to transfer to be in ordinance with all local, state, and federal laws as may be applicable. And 2, further authorize the Board of Selectmen to undertake all such actions, such as may be required to effect the foregoing conveyance, including but not limited to the filing and prosecution of a petition for declaratory judgment in a court of competent jurisdiction relative to future uses of the property, and or the petitioning of the general court of the Commonwealth under applicable law for state legislation accompanying the same, or take other action in relation thereto.
Okay, we don't need to take another action. You want to take this action, right? Okay. Is there a second? The motion's been made and seconded. We have some discussion. Gentleman in the back.
I didn't know who. Joe Mazzola, Veteran Service Officer for Townsend, Ashby, and Pepperell. I'm asked the Housing Authority, what type of housing are we putting up there?
Okay, question comes on the motion. Do you have a series of questions,
on
sir?
the motion, you say you're putting in low, moderate veterans housing. We're selling the property for veterans housing, or are we selling the property for someone to buy to put veterans housing up?
Okay, the question comes on the motion. Ms. Lizio, do you?
Hold on, I'm not done yet.
All right, we can defer to Mr. Costas if you can address that.
I can, through you, and thank you, Mr. Moderator. So I believe the intention of the article, and certainly the way that it's been drafted, is to provide the Board of Selectmen with full authority to, as it says in the first subsection of the article, convey, sell, or otherwise dispose of that property that's referenced, as you say, for the purpose of developing low to moderate income housing. This is simply an authorization article. There is not a developer that is identified yet. There's no partnership or relationship established yet. There would be procurement laws that would need to be followed before such a developer was identified. So there's much more work to be done. This is sort of a preliminary step, as I understand it, to provide the authorization for this property to be conveyed subject to all applicable laws. And consistent with the latter part of the article, there's also a belief based upon some of the history of this property, which I am only beginning to become familiar with, that there may be the need for certain actions by a court of law as well to affirm that we are able to develop this property or enter into an agreement to develop this property consistent with the underlying restrictions that are on it.
Okay, yes, but I understand that. But however, why are we specifically targeting that property for low veterans housing?
A question comes on, why are we specifically
Yeah, right.
restricting
Why
that
is
to
that wording
veterans?
for low veterans housing? Why you just put on senior citizen housing or HUD housing or what?
Okay, question comes on the motion. Mr. Costas?
So, Mr. Moderator, I can't speak to the impetus behind the article. The article has been drafted such that it's been specific to the development of low to moderate income housing for veterans. That's how it's drafted. If there were to be a desire to use it for a different purpose, there would need to be a future warrant article proposed for a town meeting vote to change the purpose.
Okay. So the intent of the article is that it would be for veterans housing, and as Mr. Costa says, that would what they would have to use it for unless there was a change at a subsequent meeting. Ms. Craven?
Okay, all right.
Sir, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kim Craven, Lunenburg Road. Keith Jackson's going to hold the mic so that I could have some comments on this. I appreciate the work that the Townsend Housing Authority has done on this. However, I do not think this is the right motion at the right time. I would respectfully like them to withdraw this and put it on the table. That said, I do have some significant concerns with this proposal. Sorry, Town Council, they did actually take a vote to partner with Soldier On the 24th of October at their meeting. They did propose a warrant article on the 9th of November, at which time they specifically stated that it was to grant this to Soldier On. So there has already been pre-discussions. Aside from that, we're in the middle of a master planning process. And I am not speaking for the Master Plan Committee, but as a member, we have had many different public hearings. The notion of affordable housing has come up on many occasions. Veterans housing was mentioned as an area for us to investigate, but there's still a lot of work to be done there. I know that the Housing Authority in their 2015 plan did mention to investigate housing, but the notion that this should just move forward, I think, is a little bit premature. At their meeting on the 19th of October at the library, there was a presentation from Soldier On that gave a lot of specifics, that they would be single units about 400 square feet. He talked about that even though it is prohibited to have gender-specific housing, he stated that all of his housing to date is gender specific. I talked to Jack, I forget his last name, extensively on the telephone, and a lot of what he was saying was completely different than what was brought up at the meeting. I was told, Housing Authority member, that there would be 24/7 coverage with psychologists, psychiatrists. That is actually not the case. They're on call from Berkshire County. So that's one point. At that meeting, someone mentioned that now that we have this notion of veterans housing, the next step is to get all of our ducks in a row and to have what was, paraphrasing here, a super meeting so that all interested parties could come together and talk about this. If you listen to the tapes from the Townsend Housing Authority, at different times they'll say it is for single units, then they talk about multiple bedrooms. They also talk about a community center. Soldier On says specifically that they do not put staff offices or community centers in their facilities. So I think there's some big contradictions there. The other point that I think is really important is that Jack, who gave the presentation on the 19th, said in the televised public information session, I guess they're calling it, if this goes through and gets federal money, that it is the feds that decides the priority and not the town. So like Joe was saying, what is this for? Who is it for? And in talking to Jack, I asked him how many Townsend or neighbors would be eligible. He said virtually no one in Townsend would be eligible. The catchment area is about 25 miles. So if you think going east to just about Lawrence, west to about Royalston, north to about Manchester, and south to about Worcester is who would be involved. So I have many more points I could say, but I just wanted to put that out there. If there's more discussion, I can bring out some things as well.
Okay, comments come on the motion. Ms. King?
Okay, again, I'm Cindy King, and I'm not speaking as a member of the Board of Selectmen, although I am a member of the Board of Selectmen. I'm also a veteran, and I've been following the story of the plan to have veterans housing, but I have to also agree with Kim that it's just not, I don't think it's even feasible to have veterans housing in Townsend. First, there's been no needs analysis done. There hasn't been a needs analysis to determine, first of all, if we need housing at all. Two, if we need veterans housing, what are the needs of our veterans? We have 555 veterans living in Townsend by the census count and verified through the Secretary of State's office. We have, well, in order to get into the veterans housing, it has to be low to moderate income. This would virtually be the same veterans that would qualify for Chapter 115 money, which Mr. Mazzola, who was starting to ask questions about, he's our veteran service officer and he distributes that money. We have 4 veterans in Townsend out of the 555 that are eligible for Chapter 115 money, so they're low income and they're getting some financial assistance. We have 3 of those veterans live in either Atwood or Townsend Woods. So they're already housed, all but one is already housed. I have no idea who the 4 are, or who the 4th one is. And that's not going to be shared anyway. So we only have a few veterans out of 555 that are in need of financial assistance. We have about 20 or so veterans who are retired and have a disability, or if they're a family member and they're also eligible to get some tax exemptions from between excise and real estate tax. Many of us, most of the veterans in this room, as I look around and I know who you are, most of us are homeowners, and so none of us are even interested in low-income housing. And out of the over 500 veterans, they're living their lives and very content and everything's going fine, and they don't really need to have that low-income housing. So the veterans that would be coming into this housing don't live here. They live somewhere else, and they'd be coming in. The Housing Authority is talking about building something that has, unless they've changed since their last meeting, 50 units. So that would add up to 50 veterans that don't live here, that are coming from somewhere else. I'm happy to help veterans, fine, that's great. But 50 veterans to come in here that are low to moderate income, who would also be eligible for Chapter 115 money. If we brought in 50 veterans on top of the ones we already have, right now we're giving about $50,000 to $75,000 a year in our budget to provide financial assistance to the veterans that we have. If we add 50, we would have to increase that line item by $500,000 in order to help the veterans. They'd be eligible for this money. We'd also, because we have to, our veteran service officer, who only works, he's in his office one day. I know that he probably does more hours for us, but he's in his office one day. He's a part-time person providing the services, and he does a great job, and he's very diligent in helping everybody out. If we add 50 needy veterans to his work, he'll have to hire a full-time veteran service officer. So that's another probably $75,000 to $100,000 onto our budget in order to pay a full-time person and give them benefits as well. And I have no problem if we have veterans in town that really need this, and if we have veterans that need housing, I'd be very happy. I'd be first in line to provide this service. And I know that there are plenty of veterans, and I know Mr. Jackson's got his hand up, but I know that throughout the state, I'd love to do everything we can to help veterans anywhere. But I think that this is not something that's feasible for Townsend to provide it to veterans. What I do think, and doing my own little needs analysis, I'm not getting any younger, and neither is most of the town. Our population is aging. We are over 30% over 60 years old right now. We have 2 facilities, and our income is not all that high either. But we have Atwood Acres and Townsend Woods that is taking in disabled and elderly. Our population, even our veterans, Most of our veterans, almost 70% of our veterans are over 60 years old as well. Our population, 29% is over 60. We have a growing problem coming. We have, and I talk about this often, we have more and more percentage of our town is elderly. We need to look at how are we going to provide services to all of us as we get old, and we need to move from our homes, or those of us that if you don't have retirement money and your income's going to drop, our low to moderate income elders need a home or a nice place to live and stay in town. We have elderly that have been here for generations and want to stay, and we don't have enough housing for them, and they're going to have to leave. I propose and I ask the Townsend Housing Authority to take this off the table, or for us to take it off the table, or I'm not making an amendment, but that we review this and we need to look at elderly housing. We need that. I definitely agree. We need to have more housing, but I think we should be focusing on our elderly, which includes veterans. I've talked it up with some members of the community that also agree, but they would love to have veterans preference. If it's possible to get the grants and the money from HUD with a veterans preference, I'm all in. But I think we need to be looking at providing housing for our elderly. Thank you.
Okay, gentleman in the back.
Good evening. Keith Jackson, Edward Road. First of all, I'd like to thank all the veterans past and present for giving me the freedom to speak tonight in front of all you people. Thank you. First of all, I have to totally agree with everything Cindy said, and Kim also. We need to look at this. We really need to look at this. I do have to make a correction. That number's not 50. It's 75 units that they're looking at. So we're talking $750,000. So just to put this on the table so everybody understands. So at this time, I'm making a motion that we lie this on the table indefinite.
I know maybe seems a little bit kinder to just lay it on the table, but where we already have a motion on the floor, I think we have to vote on the motion that's before us. I'll recognize Mr. Sexton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I want to basically address that this article is not making any decisions in regards to what is going to be built. This article is directly to, we have 3 parcels of land that were there. The first parcel of land was gone through the same process, and it was Atwood Acres was built, Townsend Woods was built, and this basically is going to allow us to be able to get onto the land and do feasibility studies that we are looking to do. It's merely a first step into a many-step process.
Okay, I'm going to recognize my own point of order. As far as the motion to lay on the table, it is not debatable. I think it is a privileged motion. So I think we would take a vote on that. The effect of that is if we move now to lay it on the table, we're essentially taking no action, and then the article would not be voted on itself. So, and that was seconded, I believe, wasn't it? Okay. So the motion is to lay on this article on the table, not take any action on it. It's not debatable, so I'm going to ask for a vote now. It is a 2/3 vote. So all those in favor of taking no action or laying this article on the table, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. All right, I think that's more than a 2/3 majority. So we will take no action laying this matter on the table. Article 24, I believe. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $50,000 for the purpose of supplementing the stabilization fund as allowed under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $50,000 for the purpose of supplementing the stabilization fund as allowed under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Ms. Lizio.
Is it appropriate to amend this article beyond?
Beyond the scope to increase the amount.
Generally, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The motion is before you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 24, please say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Article 25, the vote to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds in the Treasury the sum of $200,000 for the purpose of supplementing the Capital Stabilization Fund as allowed under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, or take any other action in relation thereto. Is there a motion? Ms. King.
I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash in the Treasury the sum of $200,000 for the purpose of supplementing the Capital Stabilization Fund as allowed under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Sir?
Okay, Richard Shuford, Maplewood Drive. Why are there two very similar articles?
I think Mr. Miller. Oh, Mr. Kreidler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to the questioner. The law allows the town to set in stabilization accounts a certain number of types of funding. You can have a general stabilization, which was the earlier vote. That can be used for any purpose that's allowed under the law in Massachusetts by a two-thirds vote of the town. In this one that's currently before you, it's specific to capital. So this is basically trying to train ourselves to appropriate money to keep our capital improvement plan funded. So instead of putting it in a pot that can be used for anything, it's put into this very specific pot and limited solely to capital.
Question, comments come on the question on the motion. Anything else to be said? As we're ready to vote, all those in favor of the motion on Article 25, please say yes or aye. No, don't say yes, say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I'm thinking yes. It's getting late. I'm just going to Article 26 to see if the town will vote to amend the town's general bylaw, Chapter 112-14, entitled Unregistered Motor Vehicles, subsection E, as follows, with additions to the bylaw underlined and deletions from the bylaw stricken through. With the meeting's permission, I will not read the article itself, but does anyone object to that? We'll let the mover just make the motion. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Miller.
I move the town vote to amend the town's general bylaw, Chapter 112-14, entitled Unregistered Motor Vehicles, subsection E, as follows, with additions by the bylaw underlined and deletions from the bylaw stricken through. The police chief or his designee shall enforce this section. No other town official shall have the authority to enforce this section. No other town official shall investigate any potential violations. Upon a written complaint to the Board of Selectmen, the police chief or his designee shall perform a site inspection and investigation and shall report his findings to the Board of Selectmen in writing. The report shall contain the vehicle's identification number or numbers and the property address on which the vehicle or vehicles is located. If the report finds that the vehicle or vehicles is in a violation of this section, the Board of Selectmen shall send a certified letter to the owner of the land on which said vehicle or vehicles is parked, and the property owner shall have 30 days to remove said vehicle or vehicles. Whoever violates any provisions of this section of the Townsend General Bylaws shall be liable for a penalty of $100 per day for each day of the violation. Violations will be calculated from the date of certified mailing. No penalty will be assessed if the vehicle or vehicles is removed within 30 days and there are no subsequent violations on the same property.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to amend the town bylaw relative to unregistered motor vehicles. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Moderator,
Ms. Lizio.
I actually would like to make an amendment. How am I going to do that one?
You want to...
There was a section that should have been crossed out. In the second paragraph, I guess is what you'd say, the Board of Selectmen is, the police chief or his designee is the beginning of it. 2 sentences down, it says the report shall contain the vehicle identification numbers. I would like to strike the vehicle identification numbers.
Okay, it's a motion.
Second.
Right. The motion is to amend the article, or the motion rather, by striking the language, the vehicle identification numbers, and so it would read, the report shall contain the property address on which the vehicles is located. Any questions? Mr. Rochette?
Thaddeus Rochette, 2 Kemplin Court. I'm also a police officer here in town. Question for town council. This is a civil issue, not a criminal issue. So technically, police officers or the police department should not be investigating. Am I incorrect with that, town council?
Mr. Costas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So you are in the sense that under the Home Rule Amendment, municipalities have the ability, even in the civil context, to identify municipal officials, which can include the police chief or designee of the police chief, as the enforcing authority under municipal civil bylaws. And that's exactly what's being done here. Previously, the language read that it's the Board of Selectmen that acted as the enforcing authority, and this modification would simply make that enforcing authority the police chief or the police chief's designee.
Comments come on the question. Ms. Lizio.
Okay, for those of you who haven't been following this, in our selectmen's meetings, I just want to tell you a little story. This is the bane of my existence. We've received complaints of unregistered motor vehicles on several different properties. And I really think that other than Mr. Chanel, I'm the first selectman to actually act on those, and I used his report as the template for the report that I did on the ones that I went to. You can't go on somebody's property without their permission, therefore the cross out on the vehicle identification thing. But right now the law says Board of Selectmen, somebody from the board has to go out and investigate. What do I know about investigate? Okay? I got a ride from our deputy chief. And the reason I got a ride with the deputy chief is because I was afraid to even go across the street from some of these properties and be looking over at their property and the things that are in their yards. We took down the make, the model. If there was a plate on it, we took down the plate number. the color of the car, where it was located, because the law said that they had to be at least 10 feet away, or more than that, 100 feet, I think, away from a road. Most of them were 10 feet. Suffice it to say, I don't think that's a selectman's job to do. I just really don't. It's not something that we do. It's something in terms of registration. Police can find out, is that a valid plate that's on this car? If it's not, and somebody complains, we have to send out the letters. It just makes more sense, and it's going to be more enforced more, I guess is the best way to describe it, if we have somebody other than the selectmen doing it. Now, if you say that it should be the selectmen, then we'll just keep following the same old thing. But and I think the bigger problem is there are a lot of properties that have tons of junk vehicles sitting in their property, and they're visible to their neighbors. And if I were some of those neighbors, I would be complaining too. Someplace there needs to be a give and take on that stuff. I don't know. I don't think this law is going to help us with it, but I think people need to start thinking about what do you have for rights on your property versus what do your neighbors have for rights, because it does affect property values. You go to sell your house and you have basically a junkyard across the street. What are you going to get for your house? So we really want to enforce the law, but I don't think it's the selectman's job to do it. So this is a start.
Comments come on the motion. Anything else to be said? Gentlemen over here. Steve, right behind you.
Hi, I'm Gary Bustler from Turnpike Road in Townsend. I'm one of the people that Sue has investigated. And I'm reminded of a similar discussion that took place at a town meeting and other places a number of years ago, in which the chief of police said that he wasn't particularly interested in doing the activities of the selectmen, and that in fact it would be making an adverse effect on the police department, that they would be doing something that they shouldn't be doing. I'm also concerned about financial costs of the town. It doesn't tell us that the highest paid person in the public safety department will be getting a substantial amount of money to investigate. It doesn't tell us how much that's going to cost. It says, or his designee. We're not sure who we're even going to be talking to. In my case, I have openly and continuously for an excess of 50 years had a garden in my front yard. I have a number of pieces of equipment that are used in the garden, rototillers. Some of them I store in a used motor vehicle, and I have for many, many years. Now I've taken a number of these out for the purpose of disposing of the vehicle, and my equipment is being exposed to the weather. The other concerns that I have are that there are a number of discrepancies in the law. What constitutes a legally registered vehicle? I have an unregistered snowplow. I have had for in excess of 50 years. It's a yard plow. I use it. It can't be registered. It doesn't meet motor vehicle standards. What am I supposed to do? Go back to shoveling my driveway after all that time? I'm not concerned personally, but I also see that Sue says that she has feelings against entering upon somebody's property and looking around. And then She mentions that they do it by satellite. Okay, keep in mind, Big Brother is watching you. We don't need any more of this baloney. It's not necessary to find out how many sandboxes I have in my backyard. Because of the number of vehicles involved, it has been a financial hardship for me to do something, but I have done a substantial amount in a spirit of cooperation. However, the draconian results of trying to make a financial assessment makes it difficult for me to comply in a 30-day time. 30 days has in fact expired. And there needs to be more discretionary use of town facilities and our people's time than to continue some of this voodoo activities by the selectmen in town. I won't go on anymore at the present time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buzzler. Mr. Stonefield? All right, the motion's been made to move the question. This will cut off debate. Requires a 2/3 vote. All those in... Oh, right. That's right. We do have an amendment on the floor, so which was made by Ms. Lizio to strike that language about the vehicle identification number. So we will vote first. The motion, the move the question applies to that. So we will vote on moving the question on that amendment. Anyone who wishes to cut off debate, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. All right. More than 2/3 vote. So now we will vote on the amendment that Ms. Lizio made and was seconded, which was to amend the article so that that line about in the middle says that the report shall contain, they're striking the language, the vehicle identification numbers. All right. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Okay. That amendment passes. Now we have the main article before you again, the main motion as amended. Is there any discussion about this article, the amended article? Doesn't appear to be up, gentlemen. Sorry.
My address on this one. Colby Trader again. Up there. So I just want to understand what we're talking about. We're just talking about the role that the selectman is playing here. The responsibility is going to be transferred to the police to go out and inspect this violation. It's not, we're not discussing the basis of what someone can complain about someone else's yard having a vehicle in it. Is that correct?
Right. I think we're just amending a part of the bylaw concerning unregistered motor vehicles as to concerns who investigates it. So instead of the selectman, it would be the chief of police or his designee.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Ray Jackson, 14 Blood Road. I have some concerns based on the gentleman that just talked about a garden tractor, which is not a drivable vehicle, that isn't capable of having a license, and that person is going to be fined $100 a day. I just think has to be more work done on this. I don't understand all of the ramifications. I agree that the selectmen shouldn't have to do this, but there seems to be more to this that is a concern for the homeowner than it is present in my understanding. Thank you.
We don't have the whole bylaw in front of us. Maybe Ms. Lizio can help, but I am presuming that this is referring to motor vehicles. The whole article, the bylaw, is under unregistered motor vehicles. So, Ms. Lizio?
The rest of the bylaw explains it a little bit more. This was the only part we were changing, so it's the only part we brought forward. If I can remember it correctly, the only unregistered motor vehicle, you're allowed one, but it needs to be 100 feet or more away from a roadway, a public way. I don't remember all of the specifics, but basically that's what would kick it in. So you would be allowed to have your plow truck, your unregistered plow truck, sitting in the back of your yard if it were far enough away, and nobody would be able to complain about that. These are situations where there's more than one motor vehicle, and by motor vehicle, the things that I counted when I went out were truly cars or trucks, or in the case of one, there was even a, can't think of what it's called, big truck, a big truck. I mean, see, you shouldn't have me going out there. I can tell you the color. And in one property that I went to, there were several motor vehicles that had plates on them. And when we came back, we checked with the, no, not with the registry, with the assessor's office, I think it was, to see if they were valid plate numbers, and they weren't. You know, so one of them had been canceled like 3 years before. So it's motor vehicles only. You can keep as many tractors as you want. It doesn't count that. I just don't want to be the one to do it.
Mrs. Jackson. All right. Motion's been made to move the question. This will cut off debate. All those in favor of moving the question, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. It's unanimous. We are ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 26, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. That's a majority vote. I believe that passes. Article 27, and with the meeting's permission, I'm not going to read this article concerning amending the general bylaw concerning the Town Properties Committee. Any objection? Okay. Those, okay, is there a motion on Article 27? I think you do, sadly.
Okay. Mr. Moderator.
Ms. Lizio.
I move that the town vote to amend the Townsend's General Bylaw, Chapter 127, entitled Town Properties Committee as follows, with additions to the bylaw underlined and deletions from the bylaw stricken through. Section 127-1, Basic Charge. The Board of Selectmen shall annually appoint a 7-member committee to be known as the Town Properties Committee, TPC, charged with assisting, strike out assisting and put advising the Board of Selectmen with maintenance, acquisition, and sales of all town-owned properties. Section 127-2, Membership and Appointment. Amended 5-4-1999 Annual Town Meeting by Article 25. The 7-member Town Properties Committee, TPC, shall be appointed by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen shall first appoint the 5 members as follows: 1 member of the Planning Board, 1 member of the Finance Committee, 1 member of the Board of Assessors, 1 member of the Conservation Commission, and 1 member of the Highway Department. If a member of any board, committee, commission, or department declines an appointment, then the Board of Selectmen may substitute a member from the public at large. In making such substitution, the board shall consider the recommendation of the respective board, committee, commission, or department declining the appointment. The remaining 2 members shall be appointed from the public at large. All members of the TPC shall be annually appointed or reappointed on or before the last week of June.
Ms. Lizio, I
Can we
hate to
just
interrupt
go
you,
to
but
those
is the
little-
rest of the bylaw stated here? Are there no
That's it.
changes in it?
That's it.
Yeah, so I don't think you need to read all of the rest of the motion there. That as a part of the motion because there's no changes in the balance of it, right?
That's it.
Okay, so
Everything else is the same.
anyone have any question or concern? Okay, that might buy us a few minutes. Is there a second? All right. All those, so wait a minute. We got to have some discussion here now. It's not that late. Any discussion about this article? No, I don't hear any. I don't see any. Okay, it looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 27, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I think that concludes our business. I just would like to quickly say Merry Christmas. Oh, we got something else? I thought we did that one. Oh, sorry. My mistake. Oh, sorry, Kathy. I'm out of here. No. All right. Article 28. To see if the town will vote to amend the town general bylaw, Chapter 124, entitled Town Meeting, subsection 6 as follows, with additions to the bylaw underlined and deletions from the bylaw stricken through. And I'm not going to read the rest of the article and ask for a motion.
I move that the town vote to amend the town's general bylaw, Chapter 124, entitled Town Meeting, subsection 6 as follows, with additions to the bylaw underlined and deletions from the bylaw stricken through. I'm going to read everything. But notice of all town meetings shall be given by posting an attested copy of the warrant thereof at Memorial Hall at the Center, 272 Main Street, the police station with communication center stricken, deleted, 70 Brookline Road, Harbor Fire Station, 47 Main Street, West Townsend Reading Room, 264 Dudley Road, and Harbor Church, 80 Main Street, and said Townsend, 7 days at least before the time of holding the said meeting. Note, Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 10 specifies special town meetings require 14 days before posting of the warrant.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any questions? Mr. Seifert?
Okay, thank you for bearing with us here. I know everybody wants to go home, but I do have a question. It is the actual practice, I believe, to also post an electronic copy on the town website. Was there a consideration of putting any mention of that into this law?
Question comes on the motion. Mr. Kreidler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you to the gentleman, the Board of Selectmen actually are empowered by law, and they're the only ones empowered by law to make the official posting site for all meeting notices. They did take a vote 2 weeks ago to do just that. So there is an official policy of the town that all official notices for meetings, including town meetings, will be posted on the website. So it's a separate action. Period.
So, all right, thank you, Mr. Kreidler. Ms. Spofford.
According to Mass General Law, it has to be physically posted in 5 places. They mention nothing about the website, but that just came into play 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Comments come on the motion. Is there anything else to be said? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion on Article 28, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. It's unanimous. And just want to thank everybody. Wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And if you are interested in any further town service, please consider filing a volunteer form. Is there a motion to adjourn, to dissolve? Second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? This meeting's dissolved. Merry Christmas, Ben.